organization $141,652 a year if you use it instead of Copilot. One of the things that we're learning is that organizations are jumping into Copilot way too early, almost like a phase one where really they need a power agent to bridge the gap, to be that prerequisite, to start with the frameworks and communication with adoption before they roll into Copilot to where they're paying for a seat if there's no activity or abundance of activity. One of the things as a solution architect, one of the things that you have to do is come up with a framework to build these power agents at scale and allow your power app developers, your power platform developers to build these at scale. And we love power agents because power agents will allow your power platform developer to use 80% of their skill set that they've already mastered, the tips and tricks that they created for Power Apps, the tips and tricks they created for Power Automate, the nuances between Dataverse versus SharePoint as a data source versus SQL or Oracle or Cosmos DB as a data source. Like all the skills, all those tips and tricks that they've learned over the years, now they can still leverage those and build AI agents within the Power Platform, which are Power Agents. This is an example of a Power Agent. And again, this is one of those that we will create to help supplement or be a prerequisite to Copilot. Copilot, as we all know, is $30 per user per month, regardless of the usage, right? So if you're an organization of 5,000 and you want to get 20% of your people on using AI to adopt AI in a meaningful way, in a private way, and one that's within your tenant, your 365 Azure tenant, then you're going to marketing and the strong marketing, what Microsoft and the strong marketing team that they employ, they're pushing Copilot. They say, okay, this is the route to do that. That's actually not the end all be all. There's actually one intermediate step that you want to take, and this is where Power Agent. So this is a corporate agent. What is a corporate agent? A corporate agent, this is taking advantage of vibe coding. So I use vibe coding to create a nice, slick UI. What we would do is register this in the Azure App Store, put a Entra ID tag on top of it, forcing users to authenticate, single sign-on, whatever the case may be. It should be seamless. If they're in 365, they're already authenticated. They click on the link. This will just pass through. It uses the same tokens. And then it leverages the Power Platform, in this scenario, Power Automate, as a service, right? So that's that HTTP request in Power Automate, exposing that trigger as a service or as an API. You plug it in and you can send a token so you can do everything on the behalf of the user, or it can be as a service where everyone gets the same response, so on and so forth, right? This is an agent, nice slick UI using vibe coding, get the UI only. And then for the services layer, the business layer, the integration layer, all of that's Power Platform. Again, leveraging your developer skills on the Power Platform to already integrate with things that you already have, but you're exposing that as a service, get a nice slick UI, much better than what we get with Power Apps, right? Power Apps is starting to trend towards, remember back in the day when we had SharePoint, like the SharePoint 2007, 2010, 2013, it's like, yeah, we want a SharePoint site, but we don't want it to look like SharePoint. That's what we get with Power Apps. Yeah, we want a Power App, but we don't want it to look like Power Apps. So they want these slick UIs. Like the business is now demanding this slick UI, and you have a much better story with this type of UI hosted in Azure Web App or Azure Function, created with React using Vibe Code. You can spin these up in probably 2 days. A nice UI interface within 2 days. You'd probably spend more time scheduling meetings with the business than you would with the implementation of these. This is why this pattern is starting to grow. So I digress. Let's just back up a little bit. What does this look like? So here, let me just do a quick message. And again, this is going to be a agent that is grounded on your organization data. So I'm going to ask it something like, help me create a strategy for a client that needs agent that would manage their shared mailbox for incoming requests, right? They want this agent to sort their mail as any mail inbox. We get a ton of mail. So we want to sort it by folders and maybe those simple questions. We want the AI agent to respond to that. So this is my question, right? Now, notice what I'm asking. I'm not prompting this to say, hey, I'm with Alventa. We held these services. We target these types of clients. This is how we're set up. All of that is already grounded into this agent. And that lowers the friction point for users, well, I'll say regular users who may not be primed to understand like how to formulate a question, how to structure the question for the best output. They may not have that. Also, what you have here is your standard, your research, your web search, your deep reasoning, and then your different LLM types, right? We know behind the scenes, these map to O1 or 4.1 or 4.5 or GPT-5 or GPT Auto or maybe the Microsoft router, whatever the case may be. We may situate based on where we are in the enterprise and what is our solution AI architecture and strategy for the latest models. And again, what I rattled off was all open AI. You can map these to different best of breed models, right? Some of this might go to Grok. Maybe some of this goes to Perplexity for web search, or maybe some of these go to, I know, just DeepSync or something like that for deep reasoning. I know most of us may or may not do that. I say all that to say, from a user perspective, you're taking a lot of that complexity out with by referencing the model by its version or model version to more what exactly are you trying to achieve, and they can mix and match these per request. Right. So again, you just remove that question from the user, making it easy for them to ask these questions. So here, the results would be deep understanding of the mailbox, hold a discovery acceleration session, map typical, gather simple questions, deliverable, case studies, FAQs. So everything that is doing is in alignment with how we operate. We as in Alventa, we are AI agency that specialize in Microsoft technology stack, and we help companies implement AI adoption and build AI agents tailor-made for their business, right? I didn't have to tell it any of that. I just described what the problem I'm having, and it spit out how to solve it and the strategy on how to achieve it. And look, these AI starter kits, that's a service that we provide, right? The AI build team, that's a service or a model that we provide, right? And everything is grounded with how we operate and how we leverage, right? So this is the benefit of building these AI agents. So what does this look like under the hood from an architect perspective? So if we go to the whiteboard, really what you have some type of UI, right? I can build that same agent or provide that same agent to the user. This is using React UI, and this is vibe coding. Or AI, let's just say AI coding. And as you saw there, you had a handful, you had your chat history and all that stuff over on the right. And then you had your window, and then you had your text box, and then you had your button, right? And in this chat window, I didn't go into it a lot, but this is going to be very similar to what you have with ChatGPT, right? You can come in here, you can rename these. So I can rename this to strategy for mailbox client, right? And I can delete these, I can remove these, I can do everything that you have in your ChatGPT chat history. You have that ability here. Underneath this is where you have your corporate agents, right? So this is going to be a marketing agent. Again, this is going to be an agent prime with a prompt geared towards marketing, the marketing department. And you can create these marketing internal agent or marketing agent in generic. And what this mimics is what we've been doing over the years, over the decades with intranets. Every department within the organization, I would say every majority, would have a org-facing intranet site, and then they have this private department site, right? That only people within that department can have access to. And again, that's when they do department-related private stuff, right? So we're creating this new policy and procedure. It's not ready for prime time for org consumption, so we need to keep this in a tight circle as we collaborate on this document, route it for the different approvals, like maybe you have to go to legal, regulatory, and all the retention in all these other departments to make sure that all the pieces are accounted for. Once it's approved, then we post it or make it available on the intranet. We build communication around it. These agents can supply the same thing. So you can have internal agent on how they work as a marketing team internally. And then you have the external agent for the org of these are the services we provide. Ask us anything and we'll get you those answers. Like, where can I find the latest logo? Or do we have a set of stock photos that I can use in the PowerPoint? This is not going to give them the photos, but it's going to redirect them to the SharePoint library that have those photos. And if they don't have access, what they need to do to gain access, answering all those things that marketing department are probably answering that kind of distracts them with their strategy and all these other stuff. Now you can put an agent in front of that. So you have these agents here, and we can build those, and those can be grounded with SharePoint data, grounded with documents stored in SharePoint, or even just a prompt, right? So if you look at this, what's happening here, we have that chat history, and then you have the various agents. And what that looks like behind the scene, everything that you ask it here is enabled by a service. And when I say service, again, for this POC, I'm using Power Automate, but this is the same concept with Logic apps. In Power Automate, we have a solution. And this is key because you want to keep these in a solution. And we understand that in Power Automate, when it comes to solutions, you can have one or many solutions in that environment. More importantly, these solutions can share flows that may live in another solution. And we leverage that to our advantage. So we have a solution dedicated to AI Core. And then we would have a solution dedicated to, let's just call this the Corp agent. The idea, again, this is a whole concept like the controller that you have on the web API. The controller is really clean. Like, it's really just, okay, this is the business logic. To achieve this unit of work, I need to call this business service. That business service may call this reusable data service or core service, and so on and so forth. So that's what the agent in that blue solution is, really the business logic, almost like an orchestrator, so to speak, that calls the other back-end services, reusable services, to achieve a unit of work, right? So here I have an agent that is dedicated to trigger, and this is the one that has an HTTP request tied to it, and this UI can then ask it the question as a post request to the API endpoint. So basically, it has the URL to the API. It sends this message as a post request, and then this does all the heavy lifting. Instead of calling this core here to go directly to the LLM, whatever the case may be, it calls another service that knows how to handle these messages. The reason why we separate these two from an architect perspective is because this is the meat on how it calls the different services. This is just an interface that says, oh, this is an API for handling the service. We may have another different flow that interacts with Copilot, or we may have another different flow as an interface that may interact with the Microsoft Teams bot framework. So they're going to do all that contract stuff that's needed for the bot framework, or that's needed for a Copilot, like a Copilot flow. And then it would just in turn call this subflow to handle the messaging. So that way our logic, regardless of how they got to us, and again, another, like maybe a more common use case would be, this may be a SharePoint list item trigger. So when the item is created, it passes a message, and then we call this messaging flow here dedicated to the corporate agent. So regardless of how we're being triggered, batch process, item created in a SharePoint list, file uploaded in the SharePoint library, an API call from Copilot, API call from a legacy service, whatever the case may be, we're going to call the same logic here for a corp service. That would then call all of our reusable core services. And our reusable core services would do something like, oh, I need to get the prompt. So this is going to pass to the prompt key. Give me that prompt. And based on the question, I need to call this LLM with this version, right? When I say version, is it standard? Is it deep reasoning? Is it web research? All of that is in your core, because honestly, this never changes per agent. It's the same concept. It's building that message array that you have to build to pass that information to the LLM, right? So you have to have your system prompt. That's your prompt. You have to have the initial question from the user. That's your user message. And then you pass it over. Maybe you have history. So maybe a system, user assistant, user assistant, user assistant, user, the new one, and then you pass it on, right? So all of that is table stakes. And these are the things that we repeat. It would be against your enterprise architecture pattern to have that logic in 50 different places. That's when you run into a ton of problems, right? So this is the whole concept. So it's really your business logic here and then your reusable flow logic here. And we're doing all of this in Power Automate because Power Automate, this is why I like the Power Agent pattern. Power Automate already have these structures and assets set up. Not only do they have this set up for like solutions and reusable flows and all these different flexible pieces. And we ain't even talking about the connector framework, your integration framework layer that where you can integrate with Cosmo DB, you can integrate with on-prem SQL, Azure SQL, SharePoint, Dataverse. You can send approval requests, you can create documents, you can read email, you can post Microsoft Team messages, you can create tickets in Azure DevOps. Like that connector framework is vast. Right? Like, why would we learn something else to achieve what we already are skilled up to achieve? Right? So outside of that, the Power Automate also provides us with an application lifecycle framework. So if you go here, everything that we have here in our environments is already set up. So if you want to create these agents in dev, there's an environment for that. If they're good enough and you're ready for the business users to test, you package that up as a solution, deploy it to that new environment, give the user the URL to that Power Automate or that React or whatever that's representing the test environment, and you're good to go. They're testing and beating on it, logging tickets or issues, whatever the case may be. You're in dev, fixing those issues, promoting that up, bumping up the solution number. Everything stays in lockstep. And this is outside of if you have the GitHub integration to where everything's logged and then you have CICD pipelines and all this other good stuff, right? The same as with Truth. So you already have that. Here in Power Automate, you already have logging. So if I want to look at, this is the Alice agent, right? This is what I was telling you about, where very thin. All it's going to do is there's a trigger for the API call, right? That's the expose. This is my reusable service. If I want to now make this able to create with a SharePoint list item, I'm creating a new flow that's the trigger is when the item is created in a SharePoint list item, and then it's just going to recall this message here. Just for this video, I included this prompt history, but this is actually in my reusable core. So let me see what the reusable look like. Okay, so if you look at this AI agent core, this is the solution that has all of the flows that when we're building agents allow you to do that reusability, allowing you to create agents in a fraction of the time, because 60 or 70% of what you need to create is already created for you. So here, if I go into the flows, here you will see some of the common things that you're used to. Right? So agent, get prompt history with LLM. This is a really common flow because basically what this does is that all you have to do is call this with the prompt key. And when I say prompt key, I'm referring to this prompt catalog that we have in SharePoint. So this application name is unique for every prompt. And if you go inside of this, like this is the one for the corporate one. This is the prompt that helps us ground this agent with corporate data. So everything that the products that we sell, the services that we sell, our methodology, how we approach projects, some of the FAQs, like all of this is grounded here for any associate within the organization to use. And someone who is very familiar with prompt engineering, very familiar with AI, spent the time to formulate this. And now everyone in the organization can reuse it, getting much quality results than everyone trying to figure it out on their own. Like these are the benefits that you get with these agents because you can mask all of that prompt engineering into a centralized place. We love SharePoint because if we're in here And we do one, we can copy and paste this, right? Create a new one called the Alice Corp Agent Dev, right? And this is the one that we're toying around with. Say, hey, we got this new prompt. I'm seeing everything is logged. So we're seeing these results in the logs or the telemetry. Let's see if we can fine tune it. Now you're asking some of the same questions and you can compare and contrast. I have a prod version of the agent asking the question, getting the results. I have a dev version of my new prompt that I want to see what the difference will be, ask the question, and now I'm comparing the results. This supports all of that. More importantly, this is my production one. We roll it out, we run into an issue. Now we need to roll back. So now if we go to the version history, all the goodness that we have. So again, as you can see, the same bandwagon rabbit hole I went down talking about the Power Platform and all these assets in place that you can take advantage of, the same is true in SharePoint. Version control, audit information. Who changed this? When did they change it? What was changed? All of that is in the version history and in the audit, and you can lock these down, right? So if you want a certain number of people like this, you can get to item level security, or maybe you can share this out as a URL, give them URL. They don't have access to the list, but you want just-in-time access to this prompt for a particular user, right? You have access to do all of that. All that's built in. The cautionary tale is we love this new technology. We love the ADA, the MCP, the Azure agent framework, and all this other good stuff. But the question is, one, you have to reskill to learn how to use that in a responsible way, in an enterprise way. And then two, is it mature enough to achieve a lot of these use cases that we've already built patterns and practices and systems around? That's why I love the Power Agent. And that's why, as an architect, building around this theory and this concept will allow you and your dev team to solve business problems right away, because you're already building them business apps on the Power Platform. Now you just need to add another 20% to build business AI agents on the Power Platform, and this is how we leverage that. Okay, so let's dig deep in here. So this is my reusable agent that has the prompt. This already has history, like all of your chats have a memory. And when you do a new chat, there's an ID generated on that React front end. It passes that ID for every message within that series, and you build up the history, right? So you build up the memory. So if I go here, and this is the one that we were talking about with the mailbox, right? So I can do a follow-up and it understands the context. So if I say something like solution architecture diagram, workflow, okay, so I'm gonna say, give me a sample solution architecture document. Give me a sample solution architecture document. I didn't have to go back into, I'm trying this client, they got the mailbox, it's a shared mailbox, you said this, or copy and paste what the response is. All of this is going to be within context because I have memory, aka chat history, built in with this model and this design. So another thing is, and we'll come back here, look like it's processing that, right? So another thing is, within this core, so you have chat history, you also have the ability to handle another modal within your chat, right? So if they're uploading files, which is something that they will want to do, you now have an OCR capability. This is taking in the file, blob text, converted to plain text using document intelligence services within Azure. Again, keeping everything safe. Everything that you call is within your Azure wheelhouse, your tenant and your framework, and it's allowing them to get answers from that. You can also take this another step further. And again, this is going to prime the way for you to implement agents. And then what everyone's talking about now is the tools that go with those agents, right? So the agent by itself is really just call and response. I need this. Okay, here's the text response. XYZ, here's the text response. I need this. Here's a file. Here's the text response. Now you want these to get more rich with tooling. Okay, do XYZ. Okay, now generate a PDF. That's the tool. And Power Automate is primed for that. So now if you wanted to generate a document, you're going to take that text, jump into your Power Automate, fall back into your Word action, and start cranking out that document. Once you have it formatted a certain way or use a template for these types of things, like how smart your agent is, how elaborate and complex or simple your tooling is, it's really up to you. But you have the tools, you have the capability, you have the infrastructure to build almost anything within Microsoft 365. And my example is just showing you the actions within Power Automate. And we didn't bring out the big guns with the Graph API, which allowed that experience to be that much richer. Okay. So again, the corporate agent, when you embrace this Power Agent platform, architecture design, allowing your developers and your engineers to use the skills that they already have, and for enterprise to solve problems now, don't get boxed in or stuck with, oh, we embrace this new tooling in Azure. It's not mature enough to do basic things like separate application lifecycle, a dev environment from QA to prod, or when something goes bump in the night, where's my logging? Or what type of access do I need to give someone? Do I have to give all my engineers resource access, contribute access to a resource group in Azure for them to interact with these services? Again, like all of that will get figured out. It will get figured out. But in the meantime, these are things that we can start adding value with ASAP. Because again, most of the directive from our organization is from the CEO down. We need to implement AI. We need to produce things in a meaningful way. And we would like to see an ROI on this investment or on this effort. One, that ROI becomes more pay for usage versus paying for licensing the seat by implementing this agent phase one. And then from here, graduate to phase two, when and where it makes sense for the people who actually get it, right? Paying for a $30 seat per Copilot for someone who hardly ever uses ChatGPT, and now you're forcing this on them and they're not taking advantage of it, you're burning budget, right? You're burning budget. I think that's the cautionary tale that we're flagging. The Power Agent framework in general will allow you to achieve some very interesting things leveraging skill set that your team already have.